Good evening all. I'm having quite a pleasant evening, but this morning I had a very rude awakening. I switched on the radio at 7:30 this morning and was assaulted by the oleaginous tones of one Douglas Alexander.
Hear, hear, I heard that as well.
And he was really at his weaselly best, and a wonderful imitation of that other disgrace to British politics, Peter Mandelson. It was almost as if you couldn't tell the two apart. Anyway, what Douglas Alexander was doing was complaining about these horrid nationalists, these horrid independence supporters, who were being so rude to the unionists, calling them all sorts of names. Now, Douglas must have had a very sheltered life. He's obviously never heard Paxman interviewing any nationalist. He's never heard Andrew Neil. He's never read the reader's comments online from the Scotsman or the Telegraph or the Daily Mail or any other of the unionist papers. Anyway, the point about Douglas Alexander's comment was that he was calling for a serious debate. He said that we should have a serious debate about these matters, and that debate should not be sullied by rude comments on either side. Now, the trouble with the calling for the debate, we hear Joanne Lamont always calling for a debate. Every week in Parliament she calls for a debate. But the unionists, at the same time as they're calling for a debate, they avoid having a debate at any cost. They refuse to provide a positive case for the union at all. They refuse to share the information which the UK government could provide in order to enable the Scottish government to provide the information that the unionists say they need. And they produce endless obstructions to Scottish independence. It's a campaign of total and utter negativity. You can't share the currency. You can't print Scottish banknotes. You can't assume that there won't be customs barriers. You can't assume that you can travel freely to London without a passport. You can't stay in Europe. You can't stay in NATO. You can't keep your oil, and so on and so on and so on. It is that litany of total negativity which is so utterly depressing and which is getting us absolutely nowhere. Now, for me, the case for independence is self-evident, and it is overwhelmingly positive. There is very, very little negative at all about the case for independence. It is overwhelmingly positive democratically, economically, socially, internationally, and culturally. There's so much detail that one could include in any discussion. In fact, there is so much to be said in support of independence that, of course, whole books have been written about it. And if you haven't yet come across Stephen Maxwell's case for independence, then I encourage everyone to have a look at it in order to become fully informed. But to clarify my own thoughts, I tried to put independence into a nutshell from my perspective. And what I've done is I've tried to encapsulate why I believe in independence and what I think independence would bring to the country in a small pamphlet. And this I will press on every single individual this evening so that you may take it away and digest at leisure. My reasons for independence are utterly and totally positive. Firstly, it is the natural state of affairs for any country to be able to govern itself. That is a positive reason for independence. Scotland is a country. It's distinct from the rest of the UK. It's distinct in terms of its geography, its history, its economy, its culture, and above all, its political complexion. That is a positive reason for having independence, because it can emphasize its own priorities and determine which of those priorities should best be met. Also, the industry and infrastructure in Scotland is hideously underinvested and has been for decades. A positive reason for independence is that independence would enable the Scots to properly develop their industry and infrastructure. A positive reason for independence is that Scotland can create its own future, free from a union which is long past its sell-by date. The positive features of independence. Firstly, decisions will be made under independence by those who know best, that is, those who actually live here, not determined by those who barely understand what Scotland is about, and all one has to do is to read the papers, listen to the BBC, and that is so self-evident. Secondly, we would be able to have a proper written constitution based on the sovereignty of the people, not the sovereignty of politicians in Parliament. Thirdly, Scottish citizenship under such a constitution would be based on residence, not on race. In other words, Scottish citizenship, Scottish nationalism, is a civic nationalism and not a racial nationalism. So we can get rid of the racism and the sectarianism too, which could go with it.
Until UKIP take over.
A fourth positive reason for independence is that we will actually get the government we vote for. A Scottish electorate would elect the government it wished. And it's sobering to reflect that for 30 out of the last 68 years since the Second World War, for 30 of those years, Scotland has endured governments which were rejected by the Scottish electorate. Fifthly, we would have a representative voting system. In other words, under proportional representation, we have a proper representation in our Parliament according to the proportion of support that there is within the population as a whole. At the moment, it is possible under the UK first-past-the-post system for a government with a thumping majority, in essence an elected dictatorship, to be in office for 5 years on a popular vote of no more than 30%. That is not democratic. A sixth positive reason is that we shall be able to raise all our own income and be responsible for whatever we spend it on, so that we can expect our policies to be quite different from those of recent UK governments. A further positive reason, we will be able to control all of our own natural resources. We would be able to determine the rate at which they're exploited or saved and the purposes for which the proceeds could be devoted. Another positive reason, we will be able to determine our own international relations, those relations affecting trade, defence and cooperation with other countries.
Correct.
Another positive case is that we will be able to secure our own defence. I've mentioned this in this context before. At the moment, the United Kingdom cannot defend Scotland. It is incapable of defending Scotland. And it beats me why any self-respecting terrorist group hasn't already taken out one of the oil rigs, because there's nothing that we can do to preserve it, or to prevent that. Since the Nimrods were taken away from Kinloss, there is no constant, consistent aerial surveillance over the North Sea. The last time that a Russian task force was exercising off the Dornoch Firth, and we wanted to have a look and see what was going on, it took a day, a whole day, for the Royal Navy to send a frigate up from Portsmouth. Now that is not a defence of our interests. One could go on for ages with positive reasons for our independence. But what ultimately would be the benefits? And I think there are simply 4 benefits of Scottish independence. Firstly, as I've alluded to, we would have genuine democracy. We would have proportional representation, and it was for this reason that our parliamentary chamber was designed in the half horseshoe that it is at the moment. It was designed in order to encourage consensual politics. And of course what we got was the inheritance of Westminster practices brought in by the politicians in the traditional parties. So genuine democracy is the first benefit. The second, I would say, we would have a more equal and fairer society, because we would be able to raise our taxes more fairly, and we would be able to spend them more wisely in our own interests. As a fair society, we would surely not continue to be part of the fourth most unequal society in the developed world, which the UK is at the moment. Thirdly, we would have a more prosperous society. All the economic indicators point to the fact that under Scottish policies, we could become the 8th rather than the 17th, as we are at the moment, richest society, richest country in the world. With productive investment, our policies would secure that. And finally, the greatest benefit of all is that with independence, Scotland becomes a liberated society, free from an exploitative United Kingdom government, and this would result in a resurgence of national confidence and innovative creativity. And at last, we would be able to contribute constructively to the international community. Thank you.